Cool. Well, hey guys, and welcome to the first kind of DXV podcast. We're looking to kind of launch this once a week now. We've got myself, Ollie, Chris, and Nye, who are the founders of DXV, on, and this is kind of just going to be an opening session. So what we're looking to do is just chat a bit about who we are, what the company is, kind of our plans for the future. A bit about when we're going to launch and stuff like that, and then we're going to close off kind of talking a bit about what our thoughts of the Premiership rugby weekend we just had, round 13, a bit about who we think we'd have in our fantasy teams and all that sort of stuff, and yeah, so we'll kick it off quickly by going handing over to Chris and I, who are just going to chat to us a bit about of the story so far, and who we are. So guys, over to you.
The really boring bit out of the way first, TXV, and then we'll chat about some actual rugby stuff. Given that I'm clearly not the boring one, Chris with his 100 over there, so I'll let Chris kick us off and tell us all about DXV.
Yeah, no, so I think it was a good opportunity to kind of talk about who we are, what we're trying to do. So obviously fantasy game for the Premiership. When we came up with the idea about a year ago, nothing was there. So me and I just finished up the kind of round of the Six Nations, chatting over a couple of beers in a sunny beer garden, talking about kind of our fantasy teams for Six Nations and how well they had gone. We'd followed the Prem for quite a while, and I was like, there's nothing there. I know there's been a few who tried it before, but kind of how they'd gone. So fueled by a bit of Dutch courage, we decided to actually set about building one of our stuck a post out on the old Twitter, and kind of committed ourselves to it and started building from there. And that's kind of where it stemmed from. And since then, there's been a lot of done around kind of the design, the actual feel of the site, some of which we'll be sharing on socials soon, and what that's going to look like, how we plan to highlight kind of players and change the actual interface and the experience that you get when you're playing the game, which I'm quite excited about. But there's a few things about kind of how we want to do it. So we thought one of the big differences between us is in your kind of typical fantasy is the prize element. So we're talking about staking £1,000 a week on the result per round. Yeah, cash prizes, and a £5,000 kind of end of season prize as well. So it'll be 25 grand to be won over the course of a season. We're looking at as well about how we can engage the game with kind of your kind of grassroots and the actual whole rugby community. Nye's an avid rugby fan. I'm sure you hear all about his kind of background and what he's done for the game and his work with charity and kind of within the grassroots community. So really keen the game involves that, and that we're able to give back to the game that we all kind of love so much. And that's kind of where the humble beginnings. We're into development now, so we're building. I think one of the things that's worth noting at this point is that we're talking about a kind of pre-launch, almost like an opportunity to actually be involved in testing for what is the semi-finals of the season. So semi-finals and finals. So we'll talk about letting people actually come in, join the platform for free, have a tinker with the system, play the game for the semi-finals and the finals. It'll give us some data and let you get an early view into what we're doing, but we're actually launching for the kind of 24-25 season this year.
Jesus.
There's my spiel, boys. That's my 100 over.
Chris boring one. I'm just here for bands. Think of me as like a better looking Welsh Haskell. No, there's Dream 15 it's a long time in the making. I think this isn't something that's just two people have come up with as a sort of business, as a way to make money. This started as a sort of dream beforehand to give back to rugby and to help rugby, and because we wanted to play fancy rugby, we enjoyed it when we did play it, but we only got an opportunity throughout sort of the Six Nations. And so first and foremost, it is just some rugby players trying to bring what is massive rugby players and rugby geeks together in a sort of harmonious place where we can all just enjoy rugby together. And yeah, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to actually getting to it and getting it out there and seeing what people think about it.
Yeah, cool. No, thanks, guys. So kind of how do you? I mean, like we touched a bit on like the overview and kind of where the idea came from and all that sort of stuff. Do you guys want to just take us through a little bit about like kind of how dev is going and like sort of what the plan is from now and kind of until like launch, I guess, like August time, and sort of how we're going to get, we've mentioned how we're sort of different, but how are we gonna make ourselves different in terms of like bringing clubs on and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, happy to talk about the dev stuff. So we're actually quite far along. Again, we're going to do some focus groups, not too distant future, with some people who've been there with us in the beginning to be able to go through and talk through kind of what it looks like and feels like now. But we've just linked in with the data provider, Oval. So we've built the API to actually start taking data from them, which is really cool. Seeing the stats come in, and you see it kind of a big dump. There's like, I think it's something like 600 players, even if they don't all play, they're all kind of included. So lots to sort through and build that in. The kind of interface is broadly built. And how it's going to be used, some changes there from what you're familiar with. So again, trying to give people access to more information, make it a bit more engaging, a bit more kind of thoughtful in how you go through and select your team. So a lot of work's gone into that, but aiming for it to be about 80 to 90% there, end of April, early May. So that's kind of where we're dev at. In terms of the club competition, now if you want to take that over, because it's kind of your baby to run with.
Yeah, well, definitely. I think on the dev side is the two big things. We suddenly realised the cost of it and why nobody else had gone forward and done this before. Because the cost of some of the dev, if you don't already know, is astonishing. And the next bit is about Oval. There's a reason why we paired with Oval is that they are the leading provider for all the Premiership clubs in England. So it's about taking the data from a sort of honest source. And just from the few chats that we've sat down, the amount of data they track blew my mind. And I'm not new to rugby. I'm not new to what people want to look at in terms of coaching staff. But some of the data points that they track is outrageous. We're not just talking. When I was looking at they're looking at stride length for runners. It's unbelievable. It sort of blew my mind. So it's nice that we've sort of paired with them. To follow on from that, the big thing really trying to get grassroots and what is a club competition. So not only you as an individual player for fantasy get a chance to win money, but actually you give an opportunity to your local club, to your local grassroots, to be able to win them some prizes as well. So it's nice that we're sort of coming on with what is a rugby stash provider that's providing basically the prizes for the grassroots club. So where you sign up to say that you're a member or player at your local grassroots club, or you sign up to say that you want to support your local grassroots club. You then all of your fancy points will go towards what is a league just for those clubs. And that's a separate league from cash prizes, but it gives your grassroots club an opportunity to win as well. Obviously, a lot more of this will come out as we get stuff when we move through dev. But yeah, one of the big things was trying to give back to grassroots, and this is how we've decided to do it.
Cool. Have you got anything to
Other
add?
thing I think worth mentioning, sorry to jump in there as well. I think in terms of the charity stuff, so I'll let Nye give a little bit of his kind of like background, or we'll probably write something up about it. Maybe not highlight it. We'll put him on the spot right now. But in terms of like the charity, so Nye works really closely with a few rugby charities, but one in particular is kind of like Wooden Spoons. But one of the things we're really keen to do is to give that back, give something back to them. So we've talked about 10% of any profit, because one of the things that should be noted now is kind of one of the ways we're different is that it will be a paid model. So you'll be there'll be a small amount to pay to actually engage, but you're entered into the prize for the money for that. But there's also a free entry route, and you can see all that on the site when it launches, and I'll put it into the blog as well in terms of how what that looks like. But any profit that we do make, 10% of that straight off the bat goes to a charity. And later on down the line, we'd love the opportunity to let kind of like the fans and the people who use the site choose the charity it goes to as well. So have a say in that. So that's one thing I think it's worth kind of talking about at this point.
Yeah, for sure. No, cool. Thanks for that, guys. So we've kind of mentioned prizes, and and all of that sort of stuff. Should we have a quick chat about like interface? So go into a little bit about, I don't know if we can mention like our competitors and what's in the market already, but kind of how is the site going to look? I know obviously a lot of this will come out in the kind of beta version, which Chris, you've touched on already, and we'll touch on that again, kind of how to access it and all of that sort of stuff in a second. But in terms of interface, is it going to look the same as the kind of other things that are out in the market at the moment?
No, so it'll be, I mean, there's only so much change you can do, right? So there's, without trying to completely reinvent the wheel for sake of it, there's some stuff we've done to change around to give people access to more information. So you'll see when we release it, but we're talking about making it almost a little bit more like shopping, so you get a bit more information up front and there's stuff on which to base your decision. So you'll have access to some initial stats and indications of kind of how that player's performed in the long term, and also in the more recent games in terms of player pricing. So you'll have variable pricing, which will change week on week depending on the performance of that player. And this is one of those things that when I mentioned, like, that blew his mind, like the algorithm that they go through to actually work this out is incredible, and it takes into account kind of 18 months worth of performance and then weighting recent performance and all kinds of crazy math stuff. But what it results in is kind of a variable pricing that there's based entirely on the performance of that player. So if they do really well, price goes up. They don't do so well, price drops, etc., etc. So I think that's something that's a little bit different. And the basic concept is, I think, if you look at fantasy, there's two real like elements to the game. There's the selection piece, and then there's the kind of actual gameplay. So when the games are on, watching how your team gets on. And I think there's people focus a lot on kind of um, on the gameplay piece where you're watching how your players are performing, and that is the kind of real fun. But we wanted to make the actual selection kind of more engaging, make it almost a little bit more like shopping, give you more stuff to look at, more stuff to think through, and a more accurate picture of how the player's doing. Because one of the things fantasy, I think, can do is it gets you kind of closer to the game. It gives you more information about how that player performs. We've all seen it, right? Whenever the national side selection comes out, the England team, the Wales team in Nye's case, whenever they come out, the amount of debate that goes on, which is one of the things that made me think fantasy would be good, about should X or Y player come in, and this kind of gives you a chance to be like, well, put your money where your mouth is. Let's see how good of a selector you are in that respect. You know what I mean? I think it's really fun in that way. It gives you that competitive element, that competitive edge. It actually leads me on to one of the other elements that's different about us. Sorry, while I think about it. We'll have a pricing limit and a budget to choose from. So I initially didn't actually want to do that. I kind of wanted a free for all, pick who you want, pick your Dream 15 as such. And then we did some initial customer feedback that Nye organized, and people came back and they loved the kind of pricing restrictions. So went away, but back to chat to Oval about how we could do that, and they were really good about it. Had some really interesting stuff that we just talked about. But what we won't be doing is putting kind of team restrictions. So as long as budget allows, you can select kind of any player you want across your 15, which I think gives people a little bit more freedom and a little bit more excitement. So if you're a die-hard kind of Tigers fan or a die-hard, Sale fan, and you're adamant you're getting as many of those players in your team as you can, then that's 100% possible with our game, which I know a lot of models out there, the Six Nations World Cup, and the one that's already out there for the Prem and Super Brew, they have kind of, it's just the typical model is you have a kind of team limit restriction. So usually I think it's 4 players. Yeah, exactly. You're allowed 4 players from any one team. So I think we wanted to give you as much. We know people kind of like a lot of fans out there are die-hard supporters for their own club, right? And they're going to want to put as many players as they can from there. And you want to allow that, I think, is to allow that engagement with the clubs.
I think it's sort of difficult that we've all found with sort of fantasy rugby before is that you've got the absolute sort of rugby geeks that love trawling through statistics, that want numbers on meters made, that want numbers on carries, that want all the sort of stats and data that they can get to inform their choices. And there's other people that will just pick, like I very much pick sort of with my heart, who do I think is going to have a good game, who do I think's due a an interface that is simple enough that if you don't want to spend hours trawling through data and stats, you still got a good chance to pick a good team, and you can pick a team quite easy, but still be relatively informed, but have all of the data that on some of the apps is sort of hidden behind paywalls anyway. But we're going to give you all of that, and it's not sort of data that's been tracked by ourselves, by somebody else. The data that you're going to have full access to is provided by the sort of data company Oval that provide it for the clubs themselves.
Yeah, it's the same data that that the coach is looking at, right? So when when Alex Sanderson from sales looking at data for how reviewing the game, the data you're looking at is the same data he's looking at. He's probably got some more video analysis, but it's the actual data point's the same.
Brings that kind of professional sphere to it, which is quite a niche. I think pretty exciting aspect of it.
There's one other thing, sorry, actually, again, just to stop you there, one thing I can't believe I didn't mention. So we're not a seasonal game, so it's more akin to kind of your Six Nations. So those of you who've played fantasy before will recognize that, will know there's kind of two real ways you can talk about, three if you want to get really technical. There's three ways you can play the game. So one is a draft game, so you kind of all beginning at the beginning of the season, you all go in, draft a team amongst your friends, and you're limited by how many people can pick a player, etc., etc. There's another one, seasonal, where you pick your team at the beginning of the season, and you're limited by how many transfers you can make each round. So you kind of with that team throughout. It's quite difficult to do that in the Prem because of the amount that they rotate teams, squad sizes, etc., international training camps, so on and so forth. They kind of pull players away. So we went with what's a daily fantasy model. So each week you can completely revamp your team. So make 100% changes. You can change 2 players, do whatever you want to do. We can keep them all the same. It's completely down to you. But there's no limit on kind of the amount of transfers you can make each week. You can completely change it. It's very similar to what the kind of Six Nations or the World Cup app were, and how they kind of work. But that's something that I think is a little bit different to those out there as well.
No, have you got any points to add on that, or can we?
No, so it's trying to make it engaging, sort of week on. I think some of the ones that are seasonal, you can sort of you might just sort of forget about it because your interest is sort of drawn out so long. And one of the reasons why we've done this game is that not only is there a big seasonal prize for those people that are invested in fantasy, that are playing week in, week out, non-stop, like it's brilliant for them. There is definitely still something, a big prize at the end of the tunnel for them. The people that did just want to play for sort of this week, that week, really interesting games this week, or they know that they're away or can't get access, or have gone for the next couple of weeks, they're not sort of wasting money on something they can't use. So you can sort of dip in, dip out for the weeks that you really do want to play. But for the die-hard people, there is a really big sort of end of season prize to get you to come back and keep playing.
Yeah, winner. So I know you guys kind of pride yourself on being sort of, by fantasy players for fantasy players. With that in mind, can you guys just take us through a bit of a story about your kind of fantasy careers, but also touch on your like personal kind of rugby careers as well, sort of when you picked rugby up and what you've done and kind of key highlights there, and kind of just flesh that out, because I know you guys have looked at a lot of like market research throughout this process as well, sort of had that inform your design development stages and all that sort of stuff. And I know it's going to inform the future launch model as well when you go to beta and then launch in kind of August, September time. But yeah, I think if you guys take us through your kind of rugby careers and then touch a bit on your kind of fantasy experience as well.
So if we end on a high, so I'll go first for this question. So I grew up in the States. I was born in England, but grew up in the States and all overseas. So was really familiar with kind of fantasy football as a concept. Knew about it, had friends that played it. I was quite young when I lived there, so I didn't get too involved in it. But like it was kind of everywhere, right? It was just something that everyone kind of did. You'd have like a little office league and stuff like that. Then I came back to the UK when I was kind of 16 and got involved in rugby then, quite heavily. Loved it, fell in love with it in the first game I played. So played for my school, went on to uni, played for uni, played for a couple of local clubs. Then and fantasy got involved in a couple of years ago. So I started wondering if there was anything, and then I saw the Six Nations kind of when it was in its very early days, and like the UI was quite basic, but even then I think it had like something like 300,000 people playing. So got playing through that, and I'm a, one of those kind of people who just like I love stats, love to get into the depth and the weeds. Of kind of what's going on, and I think it gives you something to do about that. Like I find it really interesting to look through what an individual player does, the odds of that resulting in positive outcomes, etc., etc. And the more you kind of trawl through that and look to build models, it becomes really interesting. And fantasy kind of offered that opportunity. And after a season 2 of that, that's when kind of Nye and I started talking about actually building, going on. Well, started talking about fantasy, and then after a beer or two, actually went and did it. So that's kind of my story as such.
I'd say with all the stories I've had after a few beers, like the fact that I've just decided to start a fancy company is one of the lesser exciting ones.
Yeah.
No, I'll take it on from Chris, and like we've known each other for a fair few years now, and sort of the fancy side of it. And this is where we're probably a bit polar opposite. He loves the stats. He loves to look through all the data. Where me, I'm competitive. Growing up in South Wales, rugby's not a sport; it's a religion. You have a choice on a Sunday. You go to church or you go to rugby. So I went to rugby as soon as I can. Sort of under sixes, I think, down at Clean in South Wales. Played rugby all the way up to I'm still playing now at the age of sort of 38. Still playing for vets teams. Still playing for a local team. Um, don't get me wrong. The speed is lesser now than it was sort of 15 years ago. But rugby's been a massive part of my life. I think through everything, um, through job, through charity, through work. Managed to again, I think, play rugby on every continent apart from the Arctic, Antarctica. Managed to do some really good stuff. Break 4 Guinness World Records. Um, for the longest games ever, all done for charity, raising quite a bit of cash. Um, Managed to represent sort of Wales Deaf rugby team in sevens, 15s. So played around a lot a bit, played with some really good people. And throughout all my life, the best thing I loved is rugby club culture. And it's one of those things that you can move around quite a lot, but you find yourself a local rugby team, and you found yourself a local community, a local group of friends. Um, and fancy really kicked off when I was at a sort of local rugby club, and somebody said, "Come on, boys, tenner in. We're all doing this." And at the point, I think £5 of that was going to go to the winner of the league, and £5 was going back in to help fix up some of the changing rooms. And that was the first time I sort of played fancy rugby, and again, the start of the sort of Six Nations when it first came off. Um, and that sort of leads into what we're doing now. So I always saw fancy rugby as a way to sort of not only be yourself to have a good time and enjoy it, but obviously a way to give back to rugby. It's nice that we've sort of found a mix between us to keep everybody happy with him.
Yeah, cool. No, thanks for that, guys. I think that gives a really good flavour of like where we are and kind of what the company's about, and a bit about you guys as well. And we'll flesh that out in kind of future episodes as well, I'm sure. I'm sure there'll be more to add as kind of dev and all those bits and pieces keep ticking over. I know we're dead keen to like get everyone involved, and kind of start kind of what's the word? Speaking to people and getting people more involved, and kind of collaborating through social media and this podcast, for example, and all that sort of stuff. So in terms of the podcast moving forward, how this is obviously the intro episode, how is it going to kind of, and Chris, you're probably best placed to answer this, I guess. what is this podcast going to be about? What sort of questions are we going to answer, and all of that sort of stuff? Why should people watch?
So I think the main thing is it's the objective, and with it being a fantasy company, is to kind of highlight players. I think there's so much rugby content out there if you know where to look. Seems to be a new podcast every week, and I watch them all, so I should know. But I think the objective here is we're not like, we'll talk about the games and we'll talk about that. Obviously, the results big part of it, but I think it's a really kind of to highlight players and what they're doing and kind of how they're performing, and obviously the fancy aspect as well. So going through that in depth, I mean, you can look at the kind of stuff that's out there in the NFL and the FPL, so the Fantasy Premier League. The Scout podcast is out there that talks through the picks and the engagement and give people kind of an outlet for that. There's a number. I mean, on X, we kind of spoken to a few. You've got the Fantasy Rugby Geek, Fantasy Rugby Fan. There's a few of them kind of putting out their really good content, but we want to give it's all kind of in written format as it stands, and I think there's an opportunity to kind of do something in this space, talks about players, kind of highlights those kind of characters, their performance, and kind of how fantasy is playing out. And that's kind of what we'd like to do with this, and hopefully as we grow we can make it better and better and better, so it's not just
Three
kind of us three talking through, three blokes just talking nonsense. It becomes something that can actually add a lot of value, can do something really good. So that's the objective.
Yeah. You got anything to add to that, Nye?
Not really. I think similar to quite a lot of the fancy things, it's so subjective. You could sit there point by point, look at stats, and say that this is going to be sort of what is coming through next weekend. And it's always a fun bit I've enjoyed so far on socials is that I'll put a team up thinking that it's amazing, and somebody will comment to go, "Can't believe we picked them. That's crazy." And then come the weekend, I'm either proved sort of right or wrong. And it's great to go back and look through all the comments of people that said I made
just
a crazy
bookmarked
choice.
for days.
And I have,
just...
yeah, I absolutely have made a crazy choice in them. But the three choices that you said were absolutely bonkers next to them have all paid off.
Yeah.
Again, sort of that weekend, I think even this weekend in the fancy playing the fancy women's Six Nations, I sat there at the Saturday evening knowing that I'm 40 points clear of Chris, going like, laughing my head. To then see that he's picked Kildun and for her to get 75 points for Sunday, and he's ended up soaring right above me in our league now. It's one of those really good things that, again, just that anyone that's competitive, and most rugby fans, rugby people are, gives you that extra sort of point to be competitive about people. I love it.
Cool. Which brings us on to our next kind of point, and I guess this is kind of a bit of a flavour of what the podcast is going to be about, and hopefully more of this, less of kind of who we are and all that sort of stuff, because hopefully captured that in this podcast already. So obviously round 13 of the Premiership this weekend just gone. It's had a bit of a break for a while for the internationals. Some really, really high scoring games this weekend, guys. What were your kind of key highlights, games? Which scores were you kind of surprised about? And either of you can kind of kick this off. We'll chat a bit about kind of round 13 and how it all went.
I think, to be honest, a bit of a crazy weekend. So some results people did not see coming. Gloucester struggled to win a game kind of all season, put away Tigers, winners 2 seasons ago. You had Bears doing Northampton, league leaders.
Absolutely smashed
again,
52-21.
Yeah, and Bears, again, those who people were saying were struggling. Saracens, lots of people were down on Saracens. They'd had a bad time in Europe, had a really bad game against Bordeaux, which really lines up nicely for not next weekend, but the weekend after in the Champions Cup, as they have the little rematch, which should be good. So them putting away in what is the big game in front of 60,000 at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, putting away Quins. Sorry, Quins fans, I know it was a bit painful, but that was a pretty comprehensive demolition job by Sarries, and really showing the quality that they are. It's definitely worth a watch.
Obviously, sorry to cut you off, Chris, but obviously, I've seen a couple of articles kind of going around over the weekend where people were really surprised because obviously, Marcus Smith came off a really strong Six Nations campaign, and just didn't turn up against kind of Sarries, and Owen Farrell kind of stole the show on his 250th cap. He's off to France, obviously, which rules him out of international duty. If he was sticking around, could you guys see him kind of taking back the England shirt from Smith?
In my opinion, yeah, I'm a big Farrell fan. Like, probably one of the greatest to ever put on an England shirt, and that's saying something in my opinion. Gets he gets a lot of stick. Sometimes it could be argued warranted, sometimes unwarranted, but the quality of player he is, the way he can open up a game, the way he reads the game, people will throw around stats, and like Marcus Smith, very different player, right? Like, attacks the line. He's a running threat in and of himself. Is like, so you really got to guard him differently and play a different game when you're playing Marcus. But and Farrell won't score those tries, kind of thing. Like, he's not a huge running threat himself. He's not particularly pacey. He's not particularly evasive. Big gain line runner in the sense of like he can take it right to the line because of his physicality he brings to the game. But his distribution and his vision is just mental.
It pains me when I have to speak about him. Like, as a Welshman, I have had some like horrendous moments because of Owen Farrell. But I think you just look at the experience that he brings. It's kind of like the Lions experience, the England experience, the sort of club experience, 250 caps, the sort of salaries that he brings in. I mean, that's any club is going to miss that, and I think even at sort of the England coaches and this like would have probably liked another year of him being there. Again, just give him time to bring on sort of work with Marcus Smith. We saw it a little bit sort of pre-World Cup, World Cup, and they probably would have liked another year of sort of a comfortable Owen Farrell post World Cup. As you see what sort of Borthwick's done and stuff, and he's brought people in. He's kept some old heads in there this year, but brought a lot of new people in, hoping to get that sort of experience transfer. I think they would have liked to have him sort of in and around for another year, but there's a lot of reasons behind.
See, I'm a bit different. I wouldn't be surprised to see. I genuinely wouldn't be surprised to see him come back for 2027. One last hurrah.
Yeah. How old? I don't know how old he is actually.
I think he's pushing. He's 32. I think he'll be at the top end. He won't be quite up there with Sexton in terms of longevity or experience, shall we say, but he'll be top end of kind of your career by the time 2027 comes. But it'll depend on how like France goes, and wish him all the best in Racing 92. Goes back Stuart Lancaster, who gave him kind of his debut for England, and hopefully, I mean, you saw him play on the weekend, and he looked to be enjoying himself again, to be really enjoying the game, apart from a few moments that people who go back and watch the highlights, you'll see what I'm talking about. But it seems to be really enjoying his playing, and hopefully that can kind of bring it back out of him when he goes to France, and he can kind of enjoy. If it is the end of his international career, then hopefully he has a really good one, and if not, then brings him back to his kind of full potential in what is a really exciting league in the top 14. And then he gets a chance to play there. But yeah, the game overall I think was immense, and like that's singing Owen Farrell's praise. That's not to say Marcus Smith had a bad game, right? Like, he is an incredible mercurial talent, and he's a great player. And England's actually really gifted in the 10 shirt. When you look at, you've got Finn Smith, Marcus Smith, Owen Farrell potentially in the future, George Ford. There's some new youngsters coming through that people talk about as well in the under-20s, and that's one particular area where there's a lot of depth, and in the Premiership even more so. Like, it's almost every other week you've got like a big battle of the 10s, right? Because you've got the Smiths, you've got Farrell, Finn Russell, Hundred Pollard. Like, there's quality across the park in the Prem, so it's almost every other week you're gonna have someone comes out on top and someone comes out on bottom. So I wouldn't read too much into it, but it was definitely a great day for Farrell. I think on his 250th.
Yeah. And kind of one thing that's sort of going around, and I'm keen for your kind of insights on this, Nye, specifically, and solely because I think you're probably best placed to answer it, because you might have followed him a little bit longer than everyone else. But kind of hot topic, Louis Rees-Zammit, traveling to the NFL. He had his combine last week. We've seen a couple of like rugby players go over there. Again, there was a kind of an Australian or New Zealand player a good while ago, and I can't remember his name now. But he played a couple of games and then essentially got practice rostered. Christian Wade did the same thing. Likewise, had an absolute stormer for I think one game with the Buffalo Bills, where he ran in a sort of 80-yard touchdown, and then was never to be seen again. And as you know, since transferred back to the UK, can you see sort of Reece Zammit making a name for himself and kind of staying over there, or do you think he'll return kind of with a vengeance in a year or two?
I think the good thing he's got on his side is obviously age. He's a young guy. Clearly got a bit of a following anyway. Sort of young, good-looking guy. He's on the socials already. I think he's got the opportunity to go out there and do some good things. I think in terms of NFL, all about marketing individual players. He's got what they want. He's got a following already. He's a sort of young, good-looking bloke. Easy to sort of market across. So yeah, I do hope he does well. I think there's a lot of Welsh people sort of bitter about what was the announcement sort of the day before, what was the sort of Six Nations team announcement. There might be some people out there sort of bitter about it, but he's come out and said why he's going across. He looks to be doing all right on the combine. Like I said, he's already got a big name. He's already got a following. So yeah, we'll see how he gets on. I hope he gets on well. But
he's visiting the Broncos today, and he's off to see the Chiefs, the Super Bowl winners, tomorrow, I think it was, having already visited a couple of others. So he's got some interest actually, which was
I mean, he's a proven athlete, and they've got no doubt. And again, the sort of Americans that take this absolutely sort of to the max. They've gone back and looked at old footage. They've gone look at how he's sort of performed in rugby and whether or not he can take that across to what is NFL and a different sport. But yeah, I wish him the best. I'm not saying like most Welsh people wouldn't love to see him back in the UK playing rugby in a Welsh shirt again. And if it doesn't work out, I hope that he does sort of come back to rugby and there's nothing missed there. But yeah, let's see how he does in the NFL. And if anything, it's good for Wales, and I think in some part it's a little bit good for rugby. If he goes across there and does do really well, it probably just helps the Americans sort of look at rugby as a sort of physical sport on par.
You've already seen it actually. So there's so many American like football podcasts that are talking about rugby now, just because Louis Reece Zammit has gone over and done it. And I think he's got a few benefits, like you said. Age now is his big one, right? That's the big one that he's got in his back pocket, where he's only 22 years old, already a Lions capped player. Like he's reached kind of high levels of his sport. He's still got time to come back to it should he choose to do so. And he's only going to benefit from the training over in the NFL and the kind of professionalism and like analysis and levels that go into that. And while his pace might not, like, while in rugby he's like super quick, in the NFL he's fast, but he's not going to be, Lewis.
I think he did like
440.
440 or something, which is by all accounts, like for a wide receiver, they're clocking like 420, 422. I think is like a good time.
So he's not going to be the fastest player on the pitch in the States like he is in rugby, and that's just the nature of the athletes they have access to, right? So it's because it's a huge sport in the US they have access to. But that being said, he's also a big old unit, right? So he's not small and quick. He's nearly 100 kegs and running a 440, right? That's two different. There's like the speed and power are two very like usually contrarian things, and he's got a bit of both. So I think he's got that in his back pocket. But yeah, wish him the best, mate. Hope he does well.
Unless we can't not mention the money, right? Some of the money that's been like thrown around, even sort of going on to training.
Good for rugby. Good for his back pocket.
I mean,
absolutely blows what is professional rugby. I mean, even just to get on a training roster, some of the training roster ages over in the NFL blow what is sort of.
I think there was a rumor that it's like he'd been offered like a position, like not on the like starting roster. Obviously, he wouldn't. I don't say he wouldn't, but it'd be doubtful if he can get straight onto the kind of starting position. But I think he'd been offered a position at like 900 grand a year.
Yeah. So the latest thing, and you'll laugh because I don't say this in sort of tongue in cheek, but like he's been offered $1 million for what is essentially a practice squad roster place, which will probably see him play in the preseason games, like has happened with it was Jared Hayne, I think his name was, who went over to the NFL. He played a couple of preseason games. Highlight being scored a kind of 100-yard kick return, generated, like you guys say, loads of conversation in the NFL about kind of rugby and what it was and all this sort of stuff. I think every time it happens, it sort of sees quite a large resurgence in the rugby community and sort of in the States. But the same thing happened with Christian Wade. He kind of did a couple of preseason games and then sort of petered out and came back to the UK. Anyway, we're not a kind of a podcast concerning ourselves with the NFL, but I thought that was just an interesting piece to sort of touch on. So thanks for your guys' thoughts on that. I think we'll finish by kind of going into a little bit about who we'd kind of have in our Dream 15, kind of moving forward. So I think if we attack it by position, and Nye or Chris kind of kick us off, kind of round 13. Who are your kind of picks? Who do you think performed well? And kind of watching to next week, who would you have in your 15?
Yeah, so I'll cover the front row, given it is as a card-carrying member of the union myself. I will. So there's a number that you could look at, and like I said, the quality is cross-bunch. It's really hard to do before selection comes out, right? Again, because of the rotation. But I think for me, Genge, on his return for the Six Nations, looked really strong for Bears when he came on, and I'd expect him to pick his starting place back up in the next round. So he'd probably be one of my picks. That's kind of one to watch. And interestingly, for anyone listening, we'll preface this with we're hoping to have all the data for next week. So we've just got it in. I just need to sort through it all and make it usable, so that we can come back and actually kind of report on how these guys got on. But look forward to for next week. Thomas Detroit from Bath, kind of the leading try scorer in the front row, which is a weird place for them to be, but has looked really, really strong. But he's mixed in terms of, has he started, has he come off the bench, depends on the opposition. I mean, Johan van Grant's made some really good decisions around how he's actually played him and managed his game time, and either way he seems to put him in to get over the whitewash, and is excellent in the scrum as well, so really good choice. And then hooker, there's some really actually talented players out there. You saw Dan start in the game against Quins on the weekend, and was impressive for what is a relatively small hooker. I say small, like he's still a big lad, he still carries weight, but compared to some of the units out there, he's one of the, he's not the largest. Guy carries in the tight really well, like he's a really good carrier, and his line out was really good. Understudying under George as well at Saracens, had been no one to help. And I'm a really big fan of Cowan Dickey, so picking between them two is gonna be difficult. I love his jackal threat. I love his kind of action across the park. His defensive ability is really strong. He's also a decent carrier as well in tight. And then, so those are going to be my front row picks going forward. Nye, any thoughts on any of those?
No, I don't think so. I think the big thing is no matter what fans you are, there'll be absolute biases, and this is where I love people that sit there going, "Oh my god, I can't believe we picked Genge." The same way that when Genge gets picked for England, like that many people that will have a go. I think everyone will go solid grounds for all of them. I think Theo Dan, I think even at sort of England level, just prove he's, like you said, he's not the biggest, but just knows his way to a try line.
He's got some pace. What was the game he played? What was the game he played recently? Where I forget who it was, but he had just a break, and like he's being chased down by like a winger or centre, I forget who it was, and he just like clean breaks it through and is in the try line. I'm like, it must have been a solid 40 meters. I was like, that's pretty impressive. So yeah, I think he's definitely one to watch, and I think we'll probably see him start getting more game time, which is saying something when you're understudying Jamie George, right? England captain. So covers it. And I'll move on to the second row. So big one I'm looking forward to this weekend, and I hope to see the return of, but I don't know if you will. But I hope you do. Is Chesham and Martin for Leicester. That pairing, I think, is a powerful pairing for Tigers. And can make a big difference. You saw him in Six Nations, Chesham. Martin, ferocious in defense, just absolutely chopping people in half for fun. Big physical locks. Chesham probably got a bit more pace. You've seen him on a couple of the Six Nations ago, where just like rangy down the far side, big gate runner. Looking forward to seeing him. And then the back row, I think, is a really interesting one. There's one that I've been thinking about for a while. There's two teams in the Premiership. I mean, there's loads of them that they're blessed with some really strong back rows. There's two in particular, and they're playing each other this weekend. So you've got Northampton versus Sarries in their back row. So you've got Northampton with the likes of Courtney Laws, Tom Pearson, Lewis Ludlam, Sam Graham, Warren Augustus, like some really, really strong back row players going up against Sarries with Juan Martin Gonzalez, who's probably been one of the signings for them this season. Has probably cemented himself in that 6 shirt for them. Andy Christie, who just genuinely been incredible at the Six Nations, was like my super sub of choice. I was almost disappointed when they started him for Scotland, because I was coming on and doing wonders for me. He's again in that Sarries back row, and then they can start any of these people, right? Then they've got Ben Earl, Binley Vanapola, and Tom Willis, and that's like, I don't know who of them is going to start, but it doesn't make a whole lot of difference. There's quality throughout that back row, so I think that's going to be a really interesting kind of how that plays out. Courtney Laws, if anything, like get that man out of retirement for international, like move Pennyhill Park to Northampton if he wants to be close to his family. He has been incredible this season. And then obviously you'll have one or two England captains on the pitch for that game. So Courtney Laws, Owen Farrell, and that translates to the tens as well. If I can sort of jump ahead, but like you've got Farrell, Owen Farrell versus Finn Smith that weekend, and you've got another one in Quins versus Finn Russell versus Marcus Smith. Yeah, it's going to be for those kind of positions. I think it'll be a really, really interesting kind of battle between them and how that actually pans out. Some real quality there.
Why we're doing a fancy game about it, right? Because you just can't choose. Like just across the back row, you look from sort of no matter what club you're looking at, like the players that are on show. I mean, even sort of international wise, not even just England internationals, but sort of Welsh, Scottish internationals that are all playing in what is the English sort of Premiership plus overseas. It's
Tommy
so
Raffel
hard to pick. Yeah,
for Leicester. Tommy Raffel for Leicester. You've got what's his name, Stephen Luatua for Bristol. Absolute quality. It's so packed with talent. Like I say, it'd be so difficult to choose. And this is why I'm really struggling to nail it down. Like if I go on to 9, I've got like 4 names down. So I've got the one I'm particularly excited about is Quirk. I think Quirk is gonna be. I remember when he came on for South Africa and was for England against South Africa, and I was like, wow, that kid's impressive. Like all fast twitch muscle, just quick, nippy around the park. So I'm excited to see if he can get a run of games for Sale. He's had a bit of a run of bad luck with injury. All different ones as well. It's not like he's got a chronic kind of problem. He just keeps like he's almost like too quick for his own good. He just keeps breaking himself. You've got Randall for Bristol Bears up against Gloucester. Nippy little winger. No, sorry, nippy little 9. Loves getting around the park. Loves a snipe. And is quick enough to get it. Mitchell might be coming back for Northampton. You've got Ben Spencer. I genuinely don't know who to pick. Like, if you like.
And JVP came back.
Guns ahead. Yeah, JVP's back in for Leicester. I genuinely pencil. If you, I put a gun to my head and made me choose. Love Mitchell, but he's up against Saracens and their defense, and they look back to kind of full form. Quirk's up against Exeter. He's probably behind War. I'd probably go Randall as my pick. Just like I say, he has a proclivity for scoring tries that is pretty rare, and that's difficult to say with Spencer because did you see his try scoring tackle, like his held up. So he
Yeah.
chases down the wing and like
Yeah.
somehow miraculously stops someone from grounding the ball. I forget who it was. I've got it written down in my notes, but they're off to the side.
He gets around the ball. He turns his shoulder as the guy's still running. Sort of turns his outside shoulder, gives him no option to swap the ball in hands. It was sort of looking
It was
back to like
Carpenter, wasn't it? It was Joe Carpenter who stopped. Yeah.
like Dupont-esque when you're just
Oh,
like holding him off the line, just kind of like you absolutely not. Yeah, I'd love to see that. Nines doing what they should be doing, tracking back in that space, making those tackles.
yeah, for sure. We'll try
There
and
was
edit. We could try and edit that try in. We can talk about it. Yeah.
that was and that was a crazy. There's two things like that. So there's one where I think it was Joe Carpenter who stopped, or was it Aaron Reed? I can't remember. It's one of the two of them. I think it might have been Reed actually. Yeah, it was. And then there's another one where Joe Carpenter's tracking back. And Spencer's actually cross kicked it across to Will Muir. And so again, as Carpenter's tracking back, jumps in the air, takes the ball over his head from behind him, and brings it down to save a try. I was like, that was a great game. The scoreline didn't kind of flatter Sale, but I thought that game was a lot closer than the scoreline on until like probably 60 minutes, and then Bath started to really pull away and kind of break that game open. But that was quite a game. If you're looking for something to watch, I recommend the highlight reel for that game. It was strong. Okay, so covered 9. Only real. Yeah, we mentioned 10s. I mean, you got 2 big battles there. I don't know if Pollard will come back. He got pulled out of the game from Leicester over the weekend, so I don't know if he'll make it back for next weekend. Hopefully he does, because he's a massive boost to them. Saying that, Shilcock's done a great job in the shirt in his absence. But yeah, I think the 2 big battles are kind of Farrell versus Smith, Finn Smith.
Adrian McGinty didn't have a bad weekend yet.
Yeah, exactly. Like he had a really good weekend. I think he was the one of the 3. I think he was the fantasy pick of the week for 10 in the 10 shirt. Had a really good game, and he's another one of those that presents that running threat as well. Like likes a little line break himself, and then we'll take it and distribute. Yeah, so he's. I think next weekend the big ones to watch: Farrell versus Finn Smith. Finn Smith,
new guard versus
much heralded. Yeah, like much heralded, really talented. Probably somewhere in between kind of your George Ford / Farrell style player and your fit Marcus Smith. He's got a little bit of the X factor, but he's also really good at controlling the game and kind of that distribution piece and an eye for where the space is. He's a really talented kid. And going up against Farrell, that'll be interesting to watch. And then Finn Russell, probably. I mean, most people would probably say one of the best 10s, if not the best 10 in the world at the minute.
Yeah, he slotted 17 points at the weekend.
Yeah, because he brought his kicking boots this week. He wasn't as strong throughout the earlier parts of the tournament. Seemed to go away to international duty and has come back and remembered how to kick. So that was really good. He was impressive. Got his first drop goal of his career as well. Like, could you believe that? Over his entire international and club career, never hit a droppy. And then slotted one off his left peg. It wasn't pretty, but it got over. And it, 3 points, 3 points, right? Yeah, exactly. So that was great. And then you've got him against Marcus Smith, 2 kind of mavericky, mercurial players. I think they've been, when you've played before, they've been kind of chirping each other as well. So it'll be interesting to see. Kind of a little bit of, not necessarily niggle, but a little bit of like there's some chat I think in the margins between the 2 of them in the game, so it'll be interesting to see. You've got your centers, and I feels wrong, but I love those Bath centers. I think Redpath and Lawrence make a really nice team when they play together. Really like strong running lines from Lawrence. Crazy feet, like offloading game.
In that 12 channel, I think.
Yeah. And then Redpath was again, he's just all over the park. Like he's another one who gets. It was a bit of a mental game actually. He got into a mall and kind of almost re-drove Tom Dunn over, like re-guided him over the line. It was really weird for a position for a centre to be in, but like put in a shift to make that happen. So instrumental, hugely quality game. But then again, that ignores Esterhazen. Probably didn't have his best game against Sarries last weekend, but
Tuilangi didn't have a bad game.
Tuilangi did well.
Yeah, he had a good game. I think he got a try.
Yeah, he got a try. Yeah, he put one over. Nice little spin out. He went to hand someone off, didn't need to, and kept going. The thing with Tuilangi though is like, just the threat of Tuilangi is quite often enough to do the job. So he often finds himself running kind of dummy lines.
Yeah.
And look, but you can't ignore the moment that
Yeah.
you ignore that dummy line.
And you give him the ball. Yeah. Like
he's through.
Yeah.
It's like you have to give him that respect. And again, it's like really clever play if you've got someone like that sat in your 12 channel. People have done it for years with your big sort of Jamie Roberts, like sat there and just like send him up. And then one game, like you wouldn't see him being sent up at all. It'd be a dummy, and then suddenly bang, he's through. Yeah, the threat of Tuilangi, and he is still a threat now.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like he's just signed for Bayonne in France, and like there's been some chat about like, oh, he's getting on. You're gonna get the best out of him. He's, his injury woes, all that kind of stuff. Still a hugely quality player, and like if he's on form, he can change a game for you.
Nanu is still rocking it in America.
Yeah, true.
Like, if you're looking at Manu Taulagi and saying like maybe, he's past his prime, he not really cutting the mustard. Like Nanu is still running at 12
Yeah,
at the
true.
highest league in America.
Yeah, very, very true. As is Matt Gitu now for the same team. Like that's a hell of a that's a hell of a little pairing you've brought back. But it's good for them, right? They bring in experience to actually learn the game and like their thought process and what it looks like to play the game at the top level.
That's strong. That's strong.
Yeah. And then
back.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just saying back three.
Yeah, I think that just again, it's just quality across, and like it's probably there's two positions that for like select if you were looking at like who would you select from across the prem that are really really competitive. Back three and second and back row, they're the two highest scoring points usually in like a fantasy game positions. Excuse me, in a fantasy team, and then they're probably where you've got the most kind of exciting players, right? So back three, you've got Ivatoyi for Bristol, who he's super elusive, quick, powerful runner, good offloading game. You could have Faye Waboso coming back in for Exeter after his little bit of a concussion. I say a little bit, I don't know how bad it was, but he pulled himself out of the game for a while, so it must have been pretty bad. So, but if he comes back for Exeter, he's probably a shoe-in for me. I mean, all the raw materials to be a great kind of winger, powerful runner, great pace, and his work rate's huge. So he finds his way to get involved, which I think is what you want to see, right? So like just constantly tracking, looking for that ball. George Furbank has been on fire in the Prem, doing really well for Northampton. And if you saw Daly's performance on the weekend for Sarries, I think it was a kind of a big two fingers to all the people saying that he's been terrible. Like that was immense. Little through the leg pass, some crazy offloads. So it was mental.
Shaw Maitland had a fantastic weekend for Sarries, but some points over.
Yeah.
Benefited from what through the leg pass.
Yeah, exactly. It's probably not like I say you get a lot of these big names, and then sometimes it's just these players like who just come out of nowhere. Northampton have had a big resurgence in their back three. He's come back on from injury, so early in the Prem, they suffered. I think it was one game where they took like 3 of their wingers out, and they resorted to having a 9 on the wing. But George Hendy's has come back, James Ram's back, Tommy Freeman's going to come back in. I'd expect to see him move back to 13, where they've been playing with him. You'll probably see Dingwall going at 12, so that gives you maybe Tom Seabrook, George Furbank, Ollie Slightholme. Like if you saw his try on the weekend, powered through like 4 people to get to the try line, just couldn't stop him. One of whom is Bernard Janssen van Rensburg, like no slouch in a tackle, right? It was just like Ollie Slightholme's like, nope, over I go.
Had a banger for back.
Yep.
Like he's back in. I should give a shout out, like try from Ben Stevenson. That absolute. I sat there and thought, like, he's gone round the outside, beautiful. He's 1-on-1, little chip through maybe. Just absolutely destroyed Hodge, just boom, straight over
Route
the
1,
top.
like straight up.
But it's just something that we don't really see. We've got used to like the Rezammit. We got used to people getting 1-on-1 and preferring that little dink, that little chip to sort of, and again, or it's a little chip over, or it's a little dink, but just absolute route 1 over the top. Yeah, you're talking about collision rugby. That was 1-on-1. I backed myself over you. Couple.
Yeah, I'm going. Yeah, exactly. It's you've got to stop me, right? Like you've got 100%. Yeah, I was surprised by that. That really set a tone in that game as well for Newcastle. I know they've struggled this season with Steve Diamond coming in. They got a win in a friendly over Sale. Doesn't help them in the league, but it kind of boosts that confidence a little bit. So I think you'll see a bit more from them later on the season. But if I had to pick my back three, I'd probably go without seeing this team sheets. I'd probably go Faye Wiboso. You said Cochran Stinger there. I'm going to go him again because I think him playing outside of Ollie Lawrence, that little partner, that little pairing is working really nicely. Ollie Lawrence gets the initial gain line break and I mean, not that he needs it. Cochran Stinger's a powerful runner in himself. But then quick little offload at the back and Cochran Stinger's away. Like I said, you want to talk about Route 1 rugby, like Cochran Stinger's the man you want on a one-on-one, right? So I'd back him to do that. But then again, he's playing Quins and he's got, some mental. Yeah, so I'd probably go Cochran Stinger, Faye Wiboso, and I'd probably put Furbank in there if he comes back in, which I'd like to see him do, just because he's a really smart player, like finds his way to the space, and he deputizes 10 as well, so you're going to get points from kind of your try assists and stuff like that as well, and he's going to get kind of those, and it has a really big impact on the game. So that'd be my team. I know I haven't talked about it, so I'd go Redpath, Lawrence, Cochran Singer, Faye Wiboso, and Burbank. 10, I'd go probably gonna be Finn Russell after his performance on the weekend. Like he's finding form again. Like he had a great game for Bath. Some crazy passes, but somehow they come off. Probably Randall at 9, back row. Really a big fan of Juan Martin Gonzalez. I think he's done amazingly. Courtney Laws can't ignore, and Ben Earl just consistent,
Beast.
crazy running. Yeah, absolute animal. I go Chesham Martin in the second row. Hooker. There's an argument to go for Gabriel Ogre, Bristol, but I'd stick Cowan Dickey. I really rate Cowan Dickey. Love his jackal threat as well. I'd probably go Genge and Detroit and props, but those would be my picks. For what I think. Going a bit more of the kind of Nye way of just going off field, but when I get the stats next week, I'll try and change that around for you all.
Yeah. Cool. So thanks, guys. Some really good insights there. One last question for you before we finish. So there's 5 rounds left in the Premiership. I think going through the kind of table as is, we can rule Newcastle out, 4 points, bottom of the league. Gloucester, 26 points, out.
Can't do it.
Sale, potentially, but I think probably out. So, starting from number 7 Tigers all the way up to the top Saints, 44 points Saints versus 35 points Tigers. Who can you guys see being in the top 4 in 5 weeks' time? And who are you kind of ruling out?
First of all, as a Sale fan, I'm offended. They said like we're out. We're not done yet. All right. No, but they realistically, if I was a betting man, and I am, my money would be on Sarries. The way they played, you can't discount them, and you can never discount them. Most successful kind of Premiership team in recent history, so gonna have to count them in. Saints, almost certainly. They've got a clear enough run in now, and they had a bad game against Bristol. They didn't play. That 8-week gap didn't help them very much, I don't think, but can't rule them out. I'd probably go Bath, the quality they've got across that team. I'd probably stick them in there, and then the final place is probably going to be fought out between one of, I'd say, Quins. I don't want to rule Sale. I genuinely something just tells me that there's a chance, there's an outside chance they can come back.
I-
I mean, they were semi-finalists last season.
Was I too premature?
No, I think no. I mean, odds are not in their favor, right? This is not one of those moments where
I was a Wasps fan, dude. So my team doesn't in the league anymore.
Yeah.
Coming back. They're coming back.
Yeah.
Who do I think? Bristol's big decider will be like if they can keep that up, right? They had a storming game against Northampton,
They
but now that
52-21, they absolutely put them away. You know.
yeah, like it was a comprehensive demolition job. But at the same time, you've got to back that up, and they've got a lot of climbing to do. Yeah, I don't know if Tigers have got it. I think with the change from McKellar, it's might be a bit too much to ask. Next season, I'd maybe more, but Chiefs, Chiefs have done so well with their relatively young team.
So they sit they're fourth at the moment.
Fourth at the moment, yeah, 40 points.
And I really rate some of their players as well. Rusi Tuima, Greg Sisselau.
Cracking team.
Sorry?
They've got a cracking team.
Yeah. Like Faye Waboso, like Henry Slade, some genuine threats in there. I'd say realistically it's between them and Quins to fight out for that fourth spot. I think Sarries almost certainly go through, Bath go through, Saints go through, and then it's probably between, unless failing and Sale and Bristol are in a similar place where they have to turn it around quite heavy to kind of to make their way. But I think those two are the ones who fight out for that fourth spot, would be my guess.
Okay.
Yeah. Nice. There's a few in the run-ins. I think something would have to happen. Catastrophe for Saints not to be up there. I think Bath and Saracens are pretty safe. I think you're right. That fourth spot. I think you've got the sort of Chiefs on 40. You've got Quins like 3 points behind them. Bristol a couple of points behind them, level with Tigers. So I think it's basically them four. I think any one of them is likely to hit that sort of fourth spot. But I doubt there's going to be too many of them that will challenge top three again.
Yeah, and then even
a few rounds left.
I think it probably. I wouldn't be surprised to see a final of Saints Sarries, or Saints Sarries or Saints Bath, depending how it pans out. They are Bath Sarries won't be mental because two very.
It's that type of season that again, it's one of those that Saints think they've got it in the bag. Right, a couple of games left. You're sort of 3-4 points clear or whatever. Suddenly, I've got this in the bag. Someone will come out and do a job over you because you get that little bit complacent. You sort of know you're up there, you know you're through. The same can happen with any of those sort of top two. Bath, you sit there and got comfortable second in the table, only a couple of games left. We're going to get there. So yeah, I think probably this weekend, the next weekend is more exciting and more valuable to the clubs than the sort of final 2 weekends are.
Yeah,
because you know where you're going to be.
Cool. And on that note, thanks very much for your insights, guys, and for kind of taking us through a bit about DXV, what it means, and kind of the future for it. So look forward to kind of future episodes of this podcast, just to shed a bit more light on kind of thoughts, and have a bit of fun and humour at the same time, and then look forward to kind of summer where we look to kind of launch the beta for the website, and then move on to kind of launch in August, September, and be keen for everyone's insights when that sort of comes. We need to create like a little, I don't know, like a closed down jingle for this or something, don't we, really, to like close it all off.
Yeah,
for the podcast.
Play fancy rugby.
There
you go. We'll end
in
on
lieu
that
of that. Yeah, follow and subscribe. Bye.